It was not until 1992 that Ron Wyatt was able to find someone that lived in Saudi to go to the site and document it again for him. Now we can see this majestic mountain where God's own presence rested. Jebel al-Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia. Here's the documentation of the evidence Ron first saw in 1984. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 25, the Apostle Paul tells us, "For this Agar is Mount Sinai in Arabia." Exodus chapter 19, verse 18, "And Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire." Could this blackened peak be the result of the consuming fire of God's own presence resting upon it? In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 8 and 9, we read how Elijah came to Horeb, that is Mount Sinai, and went into a cave. Here we see a very large cave just below the solitary tree, which is several hundred feet below the blackened peak. As we view the precinct, the area at the foot of the mountain, we can see a large fence and a guardhouse which was erected immediately after Ron showed this site to a Saudi archaeologist in 1985. This fence follows along the lines of the remains of boundary markers which God directed Moses to erect. The sign by the guardhouse states that this is an archaeological site passed by royal decree and that it is unlawful to trespass subject to penalty. As we pan to the left, here we can see where the fence ends on the other side. And now, as we pan away from the holy precinct, we look out into the area of the camp of the Israelites. There are several archaeological remains still here, but this one is of particular interest for us. In Exodus chapter 32, we read of the golden calf and how Aaron fashioned it. Verse 5 says, "And when Aaron saw it, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made proclamation and said, 'Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord.'" There is little doubt that these are the remains of that very altar that Aaron built to the golden calf. When the Saudi archaeologist from Riyadh University who went there with Ron in 1985 saw this, he was very excited. The 12 petroglyphs of cows and bulls captured his interest because they are found nowhere else in Saudi Arabia. The style of their horns and bodies is distinctly ancient Egyptian, the same style found in the temples and tombs of ancient Egypt. Unable to enter the holy precinct from the front and climb upon Mount Sinai, we now approach it from the back side. Climbing the mountain here, we soon find ourselves on top of a large sheltered plateau. Here we have a better view of the blackened peak. Panning the area, we find it can easily be large enough to accommodate the 70 elders who accompanied Moses up into the mountain at one point in time. And just ahead, over that ledge, lies the holy precinct. Looking down, we see the fence, which follows along the bounds set by Moses, and just beyond that fence is a part of the camp of the Israelites. Zooming in closer to the holy precinct, we can see the remains of an ancient foundation. Could this be part of the remains of the altar God instructed Moses to build? Exodus chapter 20, verse 25 says, "And if thou wilt make me an altar of stone, thou shalt not build it of hewn stone." Panning further, we stop to look at the tracks made by the Bedouins' trucks before the fence was erected. This gives a good perspective of the enormity of the area. And here we see the guard building and archaeological sign, which we saw earlier from the front. Returning to the altar we saw earlier, the camera begins to pan outward, where we will be able to see the location of the altar to the golden calf. Exodus chapter 32, verse 19 says, And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. Still visible today also is an erosion pattern, which may signify the path where water descended from the mountain to give the people abundant water for themselves and their flocks and herds. Preparing to leave, we can look down upon the backside of the mountain and again see the vast plain area. Arriving on the opposite side of this mountain, we find an area which fits the biblical description of Rephidim, the last encampment of the Israelites before they reached Mount Sinai. In Exodus chapter 17, verse 6, the Lord tells Moses, Behold, I will stand before thee upon the rock in Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. The most incredible evidence for this site is the giant split boulder upon a hill, with evidence that large streams of water flowed from it at one time. The rocks still display the erosion pattern of tremendous amounts of water descending from this rock. As we travel through the split in the boulder, we soon can see the channels cut in the rock from the water flow on the other side. Panning outward, we can see these channels continue out into the plain. After the battle, when Israel had defeated the Amalekites, the Bible tells us in Exodus chapter 17, verse 15, we read, And Moses built an altar, and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. Here are the remains of a very ancient altar, part of it fallen, perhaps because of an earthquake or Bedouins looking for treasure inside. Enough is still intact, however, to show it was indeed an altar, as it is not hollow inside but solid all the way through. Backtracking along the path the Israelites took from the Red Sea, we can just barely make out the Gulf of Aqaba up ahead. As we continue our approach, the wadi, or canyon, seems to narrow from afar, but now it can be seen to be large enough for the vast multitude to have traveled through. And across the water, we can see the large beach area on the Egyptian side. Just as the beach on the Egyptian side is certainly large enough to accommodate several million people, here we can see that this beach also contains a tremendous plain. In Exodus chapter 14, verse 30, we read, Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. In 1984, when Ron and his sons were imprisoned here in Saudi, Ron directed his captors to this beach in a helicopter, where he showed them a Phoenician-style column with inscriptions in archaic Hebrew, indicating that King Solomon had erected this column in honor of Yahweh to commemorate the crossing of the Red Sea on dry land. Today, all that remains there is this marker noting the location of that column. As we look towards the Gulf, we can see the end of the tongue of the underwater land bridge, and that it leads across to this very beach just beyond where the column once rested. Panning the beach, we also see the restored remains of the ancient fortress we believe to be Baal Zephon of the biblical account.